Do you want to know why there's so much acrimony in the world today? Well, look no further than emotions. And if that doesn't make sense to you, well, this video is definitely for you. Today, I'm going to give you 4 amazing insights into emotions and how they affect our behavior in ways you may not have thought of before. All right, let's get into that. The first insight is the fact that emotions are learned. And what we mean by that is that as infants, we have feelings. We feel good, we feel bad, and that's pretty much it. We don't distinguish between the different types of feeling good and feeling bad. However, as we grow up and we give meaning to the world, we also give meaning to our different feelings. And what we start to say is that, oh, this feeling is this emotion. And what's really important in this is the fact that our caregivers define what that emotion is supposed to be. Meaning that they say, okay, you did this behavior, you should feel guilty for it, you should feel bad. However, another household is not going to define it in the exact same way. And that's what happens, is that we all tend to define emotions in a really kind of unique way. As a result, there might be some commonality and some overlap, but there might not. And when there isn't, that's when conflict can occur. The second insight is that emotions determine accuracy. They determine how we feel about the world. And in some cases, they can make us feel something that is not really true. For example, let's go back to the emotions are learned area. Let's say a certain behavior that I learned in my household is appropriate, as far as the greater world is concerned, is inappropriate. So in that case, I believe a certain thing to be true, but it's not really true. Another example is, let's say I believe something or think something as far as like knowledge is concerned. Let's say I latch on to some type of conspiracy theory. Well, if my friends belittle it or at least oppose it, I'm supposed to consider what they think. However, if I don't do that, and for example, let's say I under-experience shame, in that case, I'm going to ignore what others think and not include what they think into what I think. As a result, I can continue to believe something that's wrong or at the very least inaccurate, and as a result of my emotional responses, I will not change what that feeling is. The next insight is the fact that emotions are vicarious pleasure and pain. So what does that mean? I mean, we can certainly feel a certain way about ourselves. However, our feelings are influenced by the experience of others. So as a result, we will feel good or feel bad based upon something that's going on with them. So in other words, we experience pleasure and pain vicariously. And that's really important because pleasure and pain really drive everything that we do. We want to maximize feeling good, and we want to minimize feeling bad. However, if our emotions are off, well, that's going to skew how we experience pleasure and pain. For example, let's say I grew up in an abusive household. I probably felt bad a lot. And also that feeling bad was something that was either justified because I did something wrong, or my caregivers told me that that's appropriate. So in that case, I kind of have this lens, this negative associated lens with how I view the world, and that's driven by what I think pleasure and pain is and what is appropriate or not. The final concept is the fact that emotions are conditioned responses. And that's really important because we need to know how that influences us from day to day. During the course of the day, our conscious or our awareness is constantly processing information, as is our subconscious. And in both cases, based upon those experiences, as well as what happened to us in the past, they are drawing conclusions. Now, in our awareness, we know what that conclusion is, and we kind of know what the elements are that put it there. However, with our subconscious, it has no way of directly communicating what its conclusions are. And the way that it does it, though, is by making us feel something. But like I said, we don't know what was the origin of that feeling. So in some cases, that origin might be spot on, right? It might say, hey, given a certain situation, you should feel a certain way, and it makes sense. However, as a child, we've also learned inappropriate responses. So what we have to do as an adult is figure out that our physical sensations are actually influencing us. However, we have to not just take it for granted. We should never just trust our gut. We should realize that in some instances, those conditioned responses are wrong based upon some dysfunction in our childhood. The good thing to know that is that because they are conditioned responses, that means that we can change them. If we experience a feeling and know that it's incorrect and write a new ending to it, right? We don't let that feeling drive our behavior, but in fact do the appropriate higher level reasoning thing. In that case, we can now write new memories. And eventually, those new memories or new stories will overwrite the old stories and allow us to change how we feel about something. So those are the 4 insights. First up, emotions are learned. And each person's individual definition of what an emotion is going to be different than what yours is. There will be some overlap, but there will be some difference. The second is the fact that emotions determine accuracy. How we perceive the world is based upon how we feel about the world. And since we each have different definitions, we're going to perceive reality differently. Next up is the fact that emotions are pleasure and pain, and they include that for our experience as well as that of others. So we can vicariously experience pleasure and pain based upon what's going on with someone else. And that's really important because that makes us a social creature. Finally, the fact that emotions are conditioned responses, and we shouldn't necessarily just accept them as fact or reality. We should question what we are feeling, use our higher level reasoning and say, hey, does this make sense? Look at all the input that's going on. Or perhaps, have I learned an incorrect conditioned response? Well, if you have any questions, let me know. Please leave a comment, and thank you for listening.